We are now live, Chair.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name's Councillor Pounds and I'm the chair of this committee. I'd like to welcome you to East Area Committee, which is taking place this evening, Thursday, the 1st of December 2022 at 6:30 p.m. I've received apologies from Councillor Davey and Councillor Shayler. The other councillors present include Councillor Bagent, Bennett, Copley, Herbert, Healy, Howard, Moore, Pounds, Robertson, Smith and Thornborough. And county councillors Boulat, Howitt, Goodliffe and Beckett. Could any members advise if I haven't called their name, if anybody's been missed, please?
Sorry, Councillor Pounds, for interrupting. A number of the councillors don't have the invite. I just saw on a WhatsApp group, so I don't know. Yeah, there's quite a few of them.
I did actually put it I mean, they should all have received it from the officers anyway, but I've also put it in the chat quite recently. Is it possible you could put the link in, Mairead?
Yeah.
Into the WhatsApp chat. I've got a different WhatsApp on mine, which is connected to our manager, just in case we have a technical problem. Thank you. So the officers at the table for this meeting are Assistant Chief Executive Andrew Lim. Thank you for coming, Andrew. We have our committee manager is Chris Connor and our meeting producer is Boris Herzog. And we also have other speakers and other officers, which I'll introduce as we go along. If anybody has a problem hearing me, please just indicate and I'll try and speak up. And I'm sorry, I'm a bit stuffed up tonight. Yeah, you can do that either in the meeting chat function or just pop a hand up. That will be fine. This meeting is being broadcast live via the council's website, and public speakers are reminded that by appearing in this meeting, you are giving consent to being recorded. The meeting is automatically recorded and will be available via the council's YouTube pages. So the process for each agenda item is that the relevant officer will give a brief introduction to their report. Councillors and members of the public participating in the meeting will be invited to type speak in the chat function if they would like to ask a question. So I'm going to bring that up now so I see it. Great. Yes, do please put it in the chat function and then you will be asked to speak in order rather than putting the yellow hand up, because it's not always possible to see all the yellow hands. The committee manager will check the Democratic Services email box to check if any public questions have been submitted and read these out if they're received. And if we think that anybody thinks they would like a short break during proceedings, please let me know and I'll halt at the next convenient opportunity. Right, so we move to agenda item 2. Can I have an indication of any declarations of interest, please? And can you identify which item your declaration relates to? I'm not seeing any, so I'm assuming that's all okay. Thank you very much. So we move to agenda item 3, and that's the notes of the meeting on the 13th of October are attached. Are there any concerns about the minutes? No, everybody happy? Good. Thank you very much for the minutes. And I think they're agreed then. And actions, I think we have a couple of actions. One was from me, just to say that about the public art, there is no round of public art applications for grants running at the moment. That's confirmed. And there was one other, I believe, Chris.
That's correct.
Yes, you have it to hand. This is Councillor Boulat. Is Councillor Boulat here?
Yes, I am.
Hello, yes, well, you had an action to meet with Dr. Nick Johnson, which I would imagine has not been possible.
I believe that was from a few committees ago, so the meeting has taken place a few
Ah.
months, but of course it does need to be followed up after Dr. Nick gets better.
Great. Thank you very much. Right, so our next item, then we move to item agenda.
Sorry, Chair, may
the-
I just chip in on that one?
Yes,
I'm sure the acting mayor would be delighted to follow up in the mayor's absence if Councillor Boulat would like that to happen. So tell her to get in touch with me.
okay, yep. Councillor Boulat, did you hear that?
Yes,
Okay,
thank you. I will follow up on that issue. Thank you.
great, that's good, thank you. Right, so we have a question from Mr. Lewis Jordan. If you're there, Lewis, if you'd like to turn your camera on and speak. Welcome,
there.
good evening.
Thanks very much. Hi there. Yep. So my name's Lewis Jordan. I'm a member of the Cambridge branch of ACORN, the Community and Tenants Union. Some of my fellow members are here on the call too, Renato, Adam and Alice. We appreciate you putting our question up the agenda. Now, I trust all the city councillors are familiar with us now, since we were named twice in the private renters motion that was unanimously passed at the last full council meeting. We welcome the council resolving to listen to us on housing matters. Now, going by the council's own figures, there are around 600 more HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy, operating in Cambridge than are licensed, which could be housing over 3,000 tenants. Rogue landlords are renting out rooms in those houses with little regard to health and safety, charging extortionate rents, and all out of sight of the council's enforcement team. Not to mention the licensing fees that the council are missing out on. Now, we're in ACORN, we're making plans to meet with Jerry Bird, the executive councillor on this issue, in the new year about our long-term goals in this area. But right now, we're asking for two things, a timeline, a target on getting unlicensed HMOs onto that HMO register, and the restoration of the published register online on the council website. We've been in touch with a few councillors across the city about these two demands, and some, including Councillor Pounds, have enthusiastically supported us. Some have been a bit harder to reach. And we're asking openly to all the councillors on the call, how many of you will join Councillor Pounds and do what you can to see that those two things are delivered?
Thank you, Lewis. Just before I open out, just to say that, yes, I met with you and we had a good discussion, and also Councillor Holloway has met with you. Now, we were the two that proposed and seconded the motion that was passed. So just to update you, I've been meeting with Councillor Holloway, and we're liaising with the officer who drafted the motion. So there is action going on, and we know what your requests are, and certainly so yes, it's not got brushed into the long grass. We are acting on it. Okay. Any other councillors, would they like to speak in response to Lewis's request? Okay, Councillor Thornborough and Councillor Howard. If you put it in the chat, I will pick you up in order, and then Councillor Boulat. Okay, if you just pop it speak in the chat,
Yeah.
that would be really good.
Yeah, thank you for raising this again. I remember when it came to the full council and the motion was supported. I think just because we don't individually speak out in support of something doesn't mean we aren't actually supporting it. We get so many requests that we quite often talk amongst ourselves who's going to represent us to lead on something. And I'm very pleased about Councillor Holloway and Pound working with you on this to represent us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Howard was next.
Hi, Lewis. Thank you for the question. Just to confirm, I'm trying to sort a date out with Renato to meet in person. But if that isn't possible, I'm very happy to have an online meeting. So thank you again for bringing it.
Thanks.
So, Lewis, we have a request from Councillor Smith. Could we have the wording again, please? Wording of the ACORN request or the motion?
Well, sorry, it was just my I wasn't hearing it terribly well, so
Oh, sorry.
I'm sure that I will be wanting to say that sounds great, but I'd just like to know what I'm saying that sounds great too, if you don't mind.
Yeah, the two things that we're after. So it's a timeline, some sort of target published and set out by the enforcement team or the council on getting those unlicensed HMOs and that target that gap between those that are licensed and all those HMOs out there, getting them onto the register. And then the second is the publication of the full register online. It's currently available on request by an email, but we want it to be easily available for all residents to grab and then check on the status of their home.
Thank you, Lewis. And
So,
Councillor. Sorry, thank you. Yeah.
Would I be able to just so I mean they both sound really sensible. I think the only thing I'd want to check is the kind of whether there's any practicalities or legalities that might be an issue there, but certainly that issue of full transparency and making sure people know that action is being taken. And I think what's behind that is wanting to know, isn't it, that something is happening and being reassured that something is happening. And I know that with my conversations with Councillor Bird particularly, I know she's incredibly committed on this one. So to answer the question behind your question, there is a lot of commitment to supporting private tenants in the city. It's really, really vital that we do that. As a context, when I was a school leader, I had a lot of heads of department who were still in really inappropriate shared accommodation because both the price and the quality of accommodation in the city, and that was several years ago. So I'm really aware of the pressure on not just very young people, but a lot of people through the working age range in terms of their experience of being private tenants in the city. So I'm really glad that Acorn is here and keeping the voice of private tenants loud in the city. So thanks for doing that. And as I said, the only issue for me with those specific things will be checking that there's no kind of legalities, but absolutely endorsing the kind of intention behind what you're bringing there.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Boulat.
Thank you, and thank you, Louise, for your question. As I'm in the county council, not the city council, I haven't been directly involved in those debates because, of course, housing doesn't fall within my overall areas as a county councillor. But in my day job outside my council duties, I actually work very closely with Acorn in Liverpool, especially looking at migrants and the additional barriers that migrants face in private rented accommodation. So I'll be really keen to, of course, support in my capacity as county councillor, but also to connect with you if you want to discuss some of the practicalities around the migration side of it and the additional checks that migrants have to face in private rent. So I'm really happy to contribute to my knowledge from my day job as well within this councillor discussion. So please feel free to get in touch with me on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boulat. And Councillor Copley. Hello, good evening. Hi.
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much, Lewis, for bringing the voice of renters to this, explicitly with a question to this meeting. I don't have housing as my portfolio. I'm on the environment and community group. So I don't know what's involved in getting those last houses licensed, but I'm sure I speak for everyone on this call that desperately want to make life better for people who rent in Cambridge, many of whom have got terrible quality of accommodation or facing just kind of powerless in response to their landlords. And I was speaking to a renter a couple of days ago whose landlord will only put on their heating for 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening, and that's turns out like not illegal, but they're absolutely freezing in their home. So they don't have control of the thermostat. So I definitely support number 2. I'm sorry, I don't know enough about number 1 to know what the barriers are, but I kind of really want to do everything we can to get the life better for renters. It sounds as though Councillor Pounds and Councillor Bird are kind of really with me in that to try and get that goal achieved as quickly as possible.
Thank you. I think that's everybody who wanted to speak, Lewis. I hope you feel reassured that we have a real commitment on the council to do everything we can, and we can do there's plenty we can do. So I would anticipate that Councillor Holloway and I will be in touch with you within the next month, certainly, to let you know our progress, and we'll see how we get on. But I you know, there's definitely a really strong will here to tackle this problem, and it, as Councillor Copley said, it is a dreadful problem in Cambridge. So thank you very much for coming along. I hope that's given you some reassurance, and we will keep in touch.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for all those responses from all the councillors. I'll just mention on the legality issue that yeah, other city councils, other councils all around the country publish theirs freely online too. So I don't expect there'll be an issue there. And we appreciate that there's action taking place behind the scenes. We look forward to any updates very soon. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Cheerio. Cheerio. Lovely. So we're moving on to our next item now. So we have our community constabulary here. Can I welcome, I think we should have Inspector McNeil, and we have Sergeant Jim Stevenson, and we also have, I think, Karen Jarley, Community Safety Officer, and Rachel Fairhead. Is that right?
I'm afraid from the constabulary chair, it's just me.
Oh, well, that's fine.
I'm afraid Mr. McNeil
We're very
is
pleased
poorly.
to see you. Thank you.
Well, it's nice to be back, and I'm assuming you all noticed I was missing at the last meeting. No?
We did. We
Oh,
did,
thank you.
yes.
That's very
although the other constable,
Sergeant Monday filling in for me.
That's right. Sergeant Monday was very helpful also. And it was much appreciated.
I'll tell him when I see him tomorrow, Councillor.
And welcome, Rachel. That's nice to see you.
Good evening, Councillor Pounds. Sorry, apologies. Karen Jolly is also not here, I'm afraid.
All right.
You've just got me.
Anyway, well, welcome to you. Thank you. I'll hand you over to you now, Jim, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, folks, so obviously the priorities you set were set in the previous meeting, which obviously I'm afraid I'll tell you, it's nice to be back from Peterborough. But I was on attachment in Peterborough for a few months. So the areas of concern you set were antisocial driving, cycle theft, and drug dealing, antisocial behaviour, especially if it's around the protection of young people or it involves child criminal exploitation. There are a few stats in the report I'm quite happy to go over. The stats are just from my local team. So obviously that's the people I find it easiest to collect on, but since the direction you give us is for the officers I directly control, that doesn't include any activity by traffic or the response teams when they're out doing their routine patrolling or responding to incidents. This is the East team neighbourhood officers that I have direct control over, and that when you deliver priority work to the people that work on it. Often supported by other agencies. I think I saw a request for a question pop up, Chair.
Yes. Did you want to finish your report and then we'll take the questions together?
Yeah, sure. So obviously the areas of work you've set actually affect the whole city. So some of these bits are from neighbourhood policing teams directly operating in the east. Some of them is sorry, I've just seen Councillor comments. Some of them are from my officers working in other areas as well, but in return for which I get to borrow other people's officers for days of action and things like that. So I'm hoping you've all had a chance to read my report, and I'm quite happy to dive straight into questions.
Lovely, thank you. Rachel, is there anything you wanted to add before we move on to questions?
Nothing from me.
No, that's great. So we have a first question from Councillor Healy, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pines. Yes, I have two questions, if that's okay, Jim. So the first one is around, obviously, we had the sad, death of the young person recently. So I think all of us are quite concerned, about the impact on our young people across the city. So I wanted to ask if there's any additional steps being put in place for, to support young people, and, in the wake of that, particularly in our area, in East area, we've also had, issues as well. So it would be good to understand if anything extra has been done. The second question is around, at the last meeting we talked about, there's been a very steep increase, I understand, in theft, retail theft across the city, you know, which is also kind of linked to the cost of living crisis. So I wondered if we were putting support in place. And so, for example, if you come across thefts in shops, are we directing people, for example, to food hubs and food banks? Because obviously it might be linked to food poverty as well, some of these thefts. So it would be good to understand the approach in relation to that. Thanks.
No worries, Councillor. Great questions. So the first question, strangely enough, I filled in at the West Area Committee last week for Sergeant Missick because he was on holiday. That was exactly the same first question I got from the West Area Committee, so it's nice we're all on the same page, I suppose. So Operation Helix, which is the policing operation around the murder of Jesse, currently occupies something like 100 full and part-time members of policing staff across Cambridgeshire at the minute. To put that in context for you councillors, that's about 8% of the constabulary is currently working on that one job, either full-time or part-time. The area I've been given to look after is schools liaison. So I can assure you we are doing a lot because the action plan was set by me, the strategy was written by our local inspector, Mr. McNeil, and I'm the person making sure that the officers do the things that I ask them to do. I've already been in quite a few schools locally. We're setting up lots of opportunities for us to talk to young people, especially in the sort of year 9 to year 11 range. The children and young people's team at headquarters are refreshing and revamping the presentation we deliver in schools. I'm sort of helping proofread that as well at the moment. It's become, there was a certain period where we went through trying to make it softer because we didn't want to upset people in the audience, but it's getting a lot more punchy again, I think. So yes, there is lots and lots of work ongoing. My next appointment with a school is tomorrow morning, so you know it's current, it's being refreshed. We're trying to make it as age appropriate but hard hitting as we can, and there's lots of opportunity in these presentations. It's not just me standing at the front talking to a bunch of people, a bunch of children. There's lots of opportunity. We're trying to encourage schools to engage with us so that their young people can talk to us and tell us what, you know, what their concerns are, what their worries are, why certain behaviours that we all find quite alarming are becoming more prevalent. Yes, loads on that. Retail crime. Retail crime is actually owned by Sergeant Missick. He runs a local policing operation, helping local retailers out, especially if they are persistently targeted by acquisitive thieves who specialise in kind of retail crime. Personally, councillor, I haven't noticed an uptick in retail crime that I'd link back to being tied to desperation, or at least not desperation driven by food poverty anyway. The bulk of our retail crime still seems to be driven by addiction issues on the part of the offenders. But we're all reasonably human beings in the police. I think we do try and get to, whenever we arrest somebody for retail theft, it's not just a question of, you know, grilling them for what they stole and where from and then charging them and sending to court. We do seek to get to the bottom of what drives people to behaviour. For anyone who is in police custody and gets released from police custody for the last several years has been handed a A4 sheet printed on both sides that has a huge list of support agencies for people to access if their crime has been driven by sort of social desperation. But it would be a sort of trend we'd be very alive to, I think. You know, the purpose of our department is to solve problems, and actually if the reason the problem is starting to exist is because of the cost of living crisis, then we'll be the department tasked with coming up with some innovative ideas to try and fix that. And well, I hope that was okay. Thank you very much. That's great. Yes. Did you have any more comment, Councillor Healy? Or
I was just going to say thanks very much, and I'm particularly reassured by the efforts in schools and working with young people. It's really great to hear. Thanks. Thank you very much, guys. You know, it's one of the things I've always enjoyed doing. So, you know,
yes, the circumstances are tragic, but at the moment it just means I'm getting to do more of the work I think is important and enjoy doing. So, East area is getting quite a lot of extra love at the moment in the form of a Transforming Lives programme we're running with young people's social care. So
that's great to hear. Thank you. Councillor Boulette is the next speaker.
Thank you, and thank you, Jim, for your report. I note in the proactive work and emerging issues, the huge focus on Barnwell and especially antisocial behaviour. So I wish to thank you for that, for the ongoing efforts there. I know there are many discussions going on in terms of what interventions are appropriate on antisocial behaviour. So I was wondering, like, what is the time frame for, like, when we'll hear the conclusions of those various working groups and discussions in terms of identifying the interventions for the Barnwell area. And finally, I also wanted to just thank you for all the time that you spent in our ward in Abbey, including on Monday at our community safety event, where we had the visit from the Police and Crime Commissioner as well. So I think, you know, the various stakeholders and residents really appreciate, you know, your presence at our community events. And I just want to say that Jim is doing a great job engaging with our residents and stakeholders as well in Abbey. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor. I think if the Police and Crime Commissioner had come to an event in my area and I hadn't been there, the area superintendent would probably have demoted me. Rachel, are you involved in the People and Places meeting, and would you like to talk about that? I mean, I've only been to a couple since I got back from Peterborough.
I'm only involved as an attendee, but yes, I'm happy to do that. My colleague in community safety, Louise Willerton, has set up a peer group, monthly peer group and places meeting, where in response to us noticing an increase in youth related ASB post COVID particularly, and it's more about not identifying children as problems, but whether we can put some early interventions in place, various support agencies, the police, ourselves, social care, early help hub, try and identify ways in which we can support children, target child exploitation and county lines as well. So it's in its early stages, but it does seem to be proactive. There's certain young people that are being discussed regularly, and interventions attempted to try and make them, or provide them, the support to sort of steer away from trouble, as opposed to causing it. Sorry, Councillor Moore has a question.
Thank you, Rachel. That's really good to hear. Yes, Councillor Moore, would you like to speak?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, mine was back for Jim. I was just wondering, the work that you do with young people, what's the general response to you? And for those that do talk to you quite openly, what are the kind of things that young people in Cambridge are most worried about, or are the things that they think that you should know? And I imagine then that we should probably know them too. Thanks.
No, Councillor, it's a great question. So, I mean, the primary focus of all our work, and especially the things that, because I also go to the People and Places meeting that Lou set up, is first of all a sort of line of inform. So if young people want to know why the police are now suddenly interested in talking to them, it's important that we explain that actually a lot of the time it's because we're looking to inform them about what's going on, inform them about the things that the police are concerned about, ask them what worries them, and generally the young people that speak to me, I mean, I suppose they worry about the things that most young people have traditionally worried about. It's how to fit in, it's how to make friends, it's how not to feel isolated in their community, and the sort of search for acceptance and some kind of meaningful peer relationship seems to drive a lot of people's behaviour, which I completely get. Then obviously there's a line after inform, it's educate. We seek to, you know, if their behaviour is sort of considered antisocial or they are upsetting local residents, we'll ask them, have they thought about, you know, what their potential impact is on the people around them, you know, why they've chosen to be here. If there was somewhere else better suited to their needs, would they prefer to go there? And, you know, ask them if they've looked into sort of youth activities in their local area. And then if we can, we'll divert them away from the things that Rachel and her team would probably refer to as things like corrupting spaces, which is areas where they're likely to come into contact with people who, you know, initially might try to befriend them, but not for any positive reason, because they'd seek to exploit them. And actually, a lot of the things we do in school, councillor, is actually, it's not just about informing them of the dangers of potentially being groomed for criminal exploitation, but it's how to be alive to the signs in their friends that they might be being targeted, and then a reassurance that actually initially, especially if we think someone's being criminally exploited, our mission is going to be one of rescue, not prosecution. So generally, I've found the feedback I get from that is very positive. I mean, for a lot of young people, you know, the idea of, they still find the idea of talking to a uniformed police officer quite exciting. I have no idea why. My 13-year-old could not be bored by anything less. So, is that the right way around? Bored by anything more. But yeah, a lot of it. The things that they're worrying about, council, to some extent, are the things that we're worrying about, but they've got the additional pressure of, you know, trying to find their place in the world, trying to find a group of people that they feel comfortable being themselves with, and trying to find somewhere where they can, you know, just generally be themselves without incurring the wagging finger of judgmental authority. So I try not to do that.
Sorry, can I just have one follow-up question? I know it's a bit beyond the scope. It's definitely not within the police's or the city councils. But do you think that there are enough activities and safe spaces for young people in Cambridge?
Personally,
that we're all campaigning for.
Yeah, exactly. Personally, councillor, no, I don't. Which is why I run a police cadet group in my spare time. So, you know, that's one outlet for people that can come and join my police cadet group if they want to. I'm not advertising for it here. Don't think I'm doing that. But no, which is why lots of, you know, why the police have set up cadet units, is why the ambulance run a cadet unit, is why the fire service run a cadet unit. You know, we're all trying to step in and you know, create a sort of healthy environment that young people who want to come and feel that they're part of their community and make some positive contributions can come and join in. And we do a lot of work with children and young people services from the county council. I do a lot of work with children and young people services from the county council. So do my colleagues.
Thank you very much for that. That's very interesting. I just would just add that Inspector McNeil got in touch with me also because we look at the ways that people can communicate with the police, because I think that's another big issue, isn't it? Is actually getting in touch with you and people, you know, actually finding the right, and then finding their way through either whether it's online or whether it's in person, and which is better. So I've been looking at that with Wendy Johnson, the anti-social behaviour officer, as well. So that's something also to come out, and it affects young people as well. How can they quickly get in touch with the police, and which police for what sort of purpose? So that's something else that we've got in hand that I think will hopefully help the situation. So we have one more question now. It's Councillor Howard.
Sergeant, I'd just like to mirror Councillor Boudat's thanks for coming to the Community Safety Day in Abbey on Monday and for the Police and Crime Commissioner's visit. I just wanted to check some sanity, because before he arrived, we were talking about total police numbers, and I think there was a recognition that they have reduced, and yet he claimed in his Q&A session with us that they had increased. So I just wondered if you could bring some clarity for us over what time frame total numbers in the force in Cambridge City, especially, have over time decreased and then increased potentially again.
I'm sorry, Councillor, I don't have accurate numbers. Just obviously, the departments in Parkside certainly change all the time anyway. I know there's a big drive nationally to recruit lots of new police officers. we are doing our best in Cambridge to meet those targets. The last time I spoke to the inspector who's responsible for that project, he seemed to think we were on target. You know, we are also actively recruiting new police community support officers. I'm hoping to get some of those in the first half of next year. You will hopefully see more of us out and about. We all work very hard on retention, but the demographic of people joining the police seems to have changed drastically since I joined. But to be honest, Councillor, that was quite a long time ago since I joined. I can't tell you exactly what the policing numbers in Cambridge City are at the moment. And to be fair, some of that, you know, there's, even if it was the numbers at Parkside, we have some specialist units at Parkside that cover the whole of the south of the county, but then we have some specialist units not based at Parkside who spend most of their time in Cambridge City as well. And their numbers sort of wax and wane as we devote resource to them or we take it away to focus on other areas.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that's all the questions. So thank you very much for that report, Jim. That's actually really encouraging to hear what's going on, and particularly with young people and in schools, where if you can catch it there, it's pays dividends, doesn't it, later on? If everybody's happy now, then I think we'll say thank you. Rachel, was there anything you wanted to add? Any other?
No, thank you. I think Jim's covered it well.
Great. Yeah. Well, thanks ever so much for joining us. Thank you.
I do
Thanks,
have
everyone.
a follow-up request of you all, councillors. So I was really interested to hear the question from Acorn about unlicensed HMOs. I suspect this would probably actually be covered by our information sharing agreement. But obviously police officers attending incidents go into lots of different people's houses. And it would be great to know that there was a register. For instance, if we attended what we believed to be an HMO and it didn't appear to be up to what we would consider to be an acceptable standard, it would be great to know that there was a register somewhere in the council that we could check to see if that was a registered HMO, and if it wasn't, that there was a reporting mechanism for us to report our concerns about it on. So if that piece of work's ongoing, I think it would be nice for at least us to be included at least in some mechanism of being able to check and inform on residents as we attend.
That sounds brilliant. Yes, absolutely. I think that's a really good idea, because, you know, and you're going to be able to feed information across quickly to the housing team who are running the checking. Yes. And it's a good system that's running. I've just currently in Romsey there is what we suspect is an illegal and very dubious HMO is currently under going to have an inspection. So yeah, that sounds really good. So I'll push that forward. Thank you very much.
Great.
Yeah.
Please keep us posted. And thank you very much for your time, councillors. A pleasure to speak to you all as always. You know, if you need to speak to me, you're always welcome to come down to the station and speak to me in person. Please check I'm actually on duty first.
Thanks very much. Thank you for your time.
Bye.
Thank you,
Good evening,
Rachel.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye. Right. We now move on to agenda item 6. This is the Greatish Cambridge Partnership making connections consultation. So I'd like to welcome Richard Preston and Kerry Bangle. If are you both here?
Hello, Chair.
Good evening. Welcome. If you'd like to make us your report, and then we'll ask you some questions on matters arising. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. With your permission, Kerry's going to share her screen.
Yeah, great.
And I'll talk you through the presentation. And as you say, afterwards, we're very happy to respond to any questions that the committee might have.
That's coming through okay, everyone?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, making connections. As the committee will know, we're in the middle of a public consultation exercise, which I think has been fairly well covered by the media so far. And obviously tonight is another opportunity for us to spread the word and to encourage people to respond to the consultation. Okay, Kerry, can we move on to the next slide? Okay, as a bit of context setting, looking at some of the drivers behind the current proposals that are out to consultation. As councillors, you will know about the significant rise in the population in Cambridge over the last 10 years. That's likely to continue when you look at the local plan and the number of jobs and the new houses that are expected to be delivered by 2031. So that trend is going to continue. One of the early aspirations that the GCP set for itself when the city deal was signed back in 2014-15 was looking at achieving a significant reduction in traffic levels. At that stage, we were looking at a reduction of around 15% on 2011 traffic levels. Since that time, traffic has continued to increase quite significantly. So the scale of that challenge has also increased. So, you know, that target these days translates into a roughly a 25% reduction in traffic, the sort of thing that we would need to achieve to tackle many of the problems that we face. As you all know, during the pandemic, car transport was impacted quite significantly. As we come out from that, car use is returning close to its pre-COVID levels, but unfortunately, bus patronage lags well behind. There are various reasons for that, but certainly the recent focus on the level of bus services that are currently being provided doesn't really give many people that encouragement to commit to using public transport. Transport in Cambridge contributes very significantly to our carbon emissions, and I'm sure city councillors are well aware of the issues around air pollution in the city and the contribution that makes to the number of deaths in the Greater Cambridge area that can be attributed to pollution. For many people, obviously, they're very constrained in their travel patterns, and many are forced to travel by car because there's such a lack of alternatives available to them. And that's very much at the heart of the Making Connections proposals, to give people a much greater choice as they travel into and around the city. Thanks, Kerry. The GCP has a multiple strand approach to this, investing in a wide range of measures alongside the Making Connections proposals. And you're probably fully aware of all these measures, but I'll just run through them quickly. We're developing 4 new busways into the city, which are at various stages of development. Linked to that, we're proposing to provide an extra 10,000 parking spaces at new travel hubs around the Greater Cambridge area. And we continue to roll out our programme of cycle improvements, including the cross-city routes and the new greenways that feed into the city from the hinterland outside of the city. We've already delivered the bus, walking and cycling improvements on Histon Road, and we've now made a start on similar improvements on Milton Road. Working on behalf of the County Council, the GCP is also undertaking a review of the way that we classify and use our road network in the city to see how we can allocate more road space towards sustainable transport as we go forward. And we're also developing an integrated parking strategy to make sure that parking can also provide better conditions for sustainable transport. And of course, the GCP continues to support new rail connections. Thanks, Kerry. The current Making Connections proposals have largely come out of earlier engagements, and this is the latest step in quite a long engagement process with the public, starting off with the big conversation back in 2018, followed by Choices for Better Journeys, and also the work done through the Citizens' Assembly during 2019. And the information that's come out of those early engagements has influenced and informed the current proposals. When you look back at those earlier Making Connections engagement exercises, they expressed they showed that the public were very much supportive of some of the key aims that the GCP was setting itself. Certainly strong support for reducing carbon emissions, tackling pollution and congestion, and very strong support for significantly enhancing our bus network. Very strong support for backing reduction in traffic and focusing more on providing for walking and cycling, and also recognising the need to focus on improving our public spaces. Some of the preferences, when we look into some of the details, some of the early engagement suggested that there was a preference for a flexible road charge or a pollution charge over using parking charges as a demand management tool to reduce the dependency on car travel. Looking at the sort of area where we might apply some a suitable demand management tool, I think there was a preference for applying that over a larger area rather than concentrating on a smaller area. And certainly building on that strong support for improving our bus network, a preference very much for spending on more frequent services, cheaper fares, longer operating hours, and more direct services. And as I've said, these are this information has been fed into the latest proposals. Thanks, Carrie. So looking at the three key elements of the current Making Connections proposals, we're looking to transform the bus network to make sure we have more services, we have cheaper fares, to make the whole bus user experience putting it in a much better place than it is at the present time, and very much sort of mirroring the experience you might expect in places like London. We're also focused very much on continuing the investment in sustainable travel schemes, looking at how we can improve our walking and cycling links. And thirdly, the development of a sustainable travel zone where drivers would be asked to pay to use the road network, with all the revenue that's raised ring-fenced, as is required by law, ring-fenced into improving transport, providing suitable discounts, and making sure that any charging mechanism has appropriate exemptions and reimbursements available to make sure that we can address any disproportionate impacts that a charge might have. Thanks, Carrie. So looking at the bus network, we're proposing a very radical change to the way that we provide bus services in the area, with a roughly doubling of the current network, with a significant increase in frequencies and the hours of operation. There will be a much bigger role for park and ride sites, which would be outside of any charging zone. We're also investing in new travel hubs, which will provide much better interchange. And I think very importantly, this underpins the whole of the package, that we're achieving a long-term funding mechanism to allow us to operate an enhanced bus network on a sustainable basis. Thanks, Carrie. So you can see here a schematic of the new network, a vastly improved network, stretching out over a much wider area. Cheaper fares would be at the heart of this, along with faster and frequent services. As I've said, this amounts to a doubling of the network, and will make the network far more connect with far more destinations than is currently available. We're looking at very significant extensions to the operating hours. We're talking about 5 a.m. in the morning to 1 a.m., which is a very significant increase in the operating hours. We're also looking at better bus infrastructure, so the whole experience of using the bus is enhanced. Where the network doesn't provide for more rural areas, we're looking to provide demand responsive transport, where people can book services to help them connect into that wider bus network. Thanks, Carrie. I've mentioned about continuing to invest in sustainable transport, and we have a very extensive cycleway improvement programme, not only in the city, but as I've said, feeding into the city from outside through the greenways. We're also investing in more secure parking, which is a particularly important issue in Cambridge, given the high level of cycle theft that we experience. We'll also have aspirations around improving public spaces, particularly looking at how we use our highway space as part of the public realm. We also have the opportunity here to ensure that we're looking at all forms of mobility to make sure that the infrastructure improvements are as accessible to as many people as we can possibly make it. We're also looking to make access to car clubs much easier through the provision within parking schemes that are being rolled out across the city, and to give some sort of incentive for people to use car clubs, which hopefully in the longer term will lead to lower car ownership in the city and perhaps less of a need to have so many of our streets clogged with parked vehicles. Looking at the sustainable travel zone itself, as I've said, people driving motor vehicles within that zone would be charged on weekdays between 7 AM and 7 PM. All the money that would be raised would be put back into improving transport. Obviously, there are some concerns that it could be used for other means, but the legislation that would allow any charging mechanism to be brought in requires that the money has to be ring-fenced to transport improvements. It's also important to recognise that any charging mechanism would not come in until we've developed and delivered that enhanced bus network to give people the opportunity to transfer from car-based travel to public transport. We're likely to see a phased delivery of these measures. This isn't going to happen overnight, and the consultation provides details around how we would phase this over a series of years. But the aspiration is that we would start perhaps next year building up on those first initial bus improvements, and over the subsequent years we would enhance the delivery of the bus network, then leading to charges being introduced, and again those charges may be phased as well. Looking at the size of the sustainable transport zone, it roughly mirrors the city boundary. It's important to recognise that existing park and ride sites would fall out of the charging area, so that there's no problem with people travelling into the park and ride sites. So what sort of things would we deliver through the sustainable transport zone? Well, the current technical work indicates that we could expect a reduction of around 50% in car trips on the network. It's likely to generate in excess of £50 million per year, which can be fed back into improving public transport and other transport initiatives. You're likely to see a significant increase in bus usage and walking and cycling trips, which is what it's all about. And as I've said, whilst the bulk of the money would be targeted at this enhanced bus network, it also creates revenue that could be put into a wider range of measures to enhance mobility for all people across wider destinations. So looking at the proposed charges that would operate weekdays from 7 AM to 7 PM, cars and motor cycles and mopeds would be charged £5 a day. The charge for light vans and minibus type vehicles would be £10 a day. Coaches and heavy goods vehicles would be £50 a day. Registered bus services would be eligible for 100% discount, but there is the potential to link that discount with the emissions coming from individual buses that are operating on the network. In terms of hackney carriages and private hire cars, again, they would be eligible for 100% discount, provided they follow the City Council's licensing conditions, that is that they're zero emission from 2028 and they are wheelchair accessible. If you don't meet those requirements, taxis will be subject to the same charges as private cars. Of course, as I've said, it's important to recognise that there needs to be a suitable system of discounts and exemptions to make sure that we can address particular needs. Identified at this stage a group of vehicles that we would recommend would be exempt from the charge, and they're set out in the table. I think most of them, they speak for themselves. it's important to recognise for blue badge holders there would be the opportunity to register up to 2 vehicles that could receive 100% discount from the charge to allow blue badge holders to continue to use car-based travel where necessary. We're also looking at how we can address people on low incomes with the potential for a tapered discount. This is quite a complicated area, and it's still work that we're working through to make sure that we can ensure that we cover all elements of society where necessary. And we'd also be looking to exempt car club vehicles to encourage more take up of car club schemes across the city. The discounts and exemptions would be focused very much on some very sensitive areas. We're doing a lot of work with National Health Service. We're also looking to work with social care providers and the like to make sure those critical and sensitive areas are well represented within the exemptions and discounts and reimbursement schemes that we will develop in greater detail in the coming weeks and months. And we recognise the sensitivity around staff working in the NHS, and we've identified some particular needs there that we would need to reflect within the exemption, within the discounts and reimbursements. There's also a need to focus on charity needs and care workers' needs. And to make sure that we've got a flexible system. It's fair to say this is still work in progress, and I'm sure that in response to the public consultation that the GCP board will want to look very closely at this area to make sure that they're getting it at the right level. So in terms of the timeline, the current consultation ends just before Christmas. I think it's the 23rd of December is the closing date, midday. Subject to the right decision being made, ultimately it's the final decision on the measures rests with the county council. It's the key decision-making body. It will take on the operation of the charging scheme and will be responsible for the revenue that's raised. That decision will be made sometime during 2023 by the county council. We would be looking to start some of the bus service improvements during 2023. And then that may focus initially on enhancing some of the key routes in terms of frequency. And then we'd be looking to focus on introducing lower fares from 2024 onwards. And then subsequent years, we would then be ramping up those improvements to the bus service in terms of extended hours, improved interchange to rail services, and looking at how we can deliver rural demand responsive travel as part of the offer. And at the same time, over 2025, 2026, we'd be looking to phase in some of the charging, some of the charges on certain classes of vehicle, moving towards a potential for a full scheme to be operating by 2027/28 on that basis of a 7 till 7 weekday charging mechanism. So, as I've said, the consultation runs until the 22nd of December. There's a lot of detail on the GCP website about online events, in-person events, and obviously this is an opportunity for us to encourage councillors to encourage as many members of the public to engage with the consultation as we can. We've had, I think, something like 12,000 responses to date, so it's been a very successful consultation to date, but clearly we're very keen to build on that in the last couple of weeks of the consultation. So anything you can do to help us spread the word, we'd be very grateful for that. Thank you, Chair. We're very happy to respond to any questions the committee has.
Thank you very much, Richard. That was a really clear and useful presentation. Thank you very much. We'll move over to some questions now. Can I please ask you to be reasonably brief, because obviously time's ticking on and we also have to look at the EIPs this evening. So does anybody would like to ask Richard, question. Okay, Councillor Thornborough.
Is it possible to get some of the small leaflets so that if I'm out and about, I can actually hand leaflets out? I also really like the leaflet which says if not now, then when. I think that's by the Sustainable Travel Alliance. So is there somewhere I can go and pick up a bunch of leaflets and so I can try and give them to people?
Councillor, we'll take that back to our comms team and ask them to action that as soon as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Copley.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes, I've got 3 questions, one broad, one complex and one simple. So yeah, thank you very much for coming along and giving the consultation. The first one is about kind of going back to the different options to result in a proper bus network that goes between all the places that people need to get to. And I know that a workplace parking levy was previously discarded because it wouldn't raise enough revenue to provide a bus network. But I wondered if work had been done looking at a combination of a congestion charge proposal plus a workplace parking levy, such that an amount of revenue could be raised with a different or more generous set of exemptions for the kind of squeezed middle, who many of whom are very anxious about this proposal for a charge. So that was question 1. Question 2 was there are various people for whom there isn't a good public transport network for what they need to do. Like, for example, maybe they work somewhere quite rural where there isn't a bus route that will go there and they live in the city or something. And I wondered if consideration had been given for a kind of fairly complex exemption system, whereby if there was no public transport route for where you needed to go, like to get to your workplace or something, exemptions could be applied on those kind of grounds. And then finally, the third question will hopefully be the most simple one, which was that on the GCP website, it said to give your feedback, you could come to an event. Although I also heard from someone else that events were primarily about explaining about the consultation and giving information. So I wondered if a resident was to go to an event and speak to a representative of the GCP and say, this is how I feel about the proposal, is that captured, or do they need to also fill in the survey or email or write to the GCP with the same views to have their view counted as part of the whole consultation? Thank you very much.
Well, perhaps if I could tackle those in reverse order. In terms of attending at events, as you've said, Councillor, the role of officers there is to explain the proposals and to encourage people to respond to the public consultation. Clearly, as officers, we pick up on some of the themes that are coming out of that consultation, but clearly if people want their views registered, we do encourage them to go online and fill in the consultation or write to us or email us in whatever form suits you. But it's not really appropriate for us to interpret what you're saying and then sort of submit the feedback on behalf of the public. But the engagement has been very good. It's raised lots of issues, and we do value people coming along to those events. But clearly it is important that people do take the opportunity to fill in the questionnaire or email us, or feedback in whatever format suits you. We're not prescriptive on, you're having to go online to fill in our consultation if you don't feel comfortable with that. In terms of that lack of rural services, could there be exemptions if we're not able to provide for that need? I think that's an interesting idea. I think there may be some, I'm not sure how the mechanism will work for that, but clearly we've captured that issue here tonight. And I think we'll need to reflect on that. But certainly there is an aspiration at this stage to make sure we are plugging as many of those gaps as we can within the rural network. And obviously demand a rural transport can provide a useful addition to the fixed network. But again, the world is never perfect, and it may be that there are some areas that, you know, still lack the sort of level of provision that people require, and it may be appropriate to consider how we respond to that. So I think we've captured that issue. Kerry, did you want to answer the issue around whether a parking levy should be part of the mix?
Yeah, sure. Hi there, Councillor Copley. Yes, the workplace parking levy was ruled out on the grounds that it wasn't a favourable concept, so it wasn't popular in the consultation that we did in back end of last year, and as you say, it didn't raise enough money. So I think to combine the two would be perhaps a step too far for people to contemplate, but it's certainly I think, yeah, as a sort of mix of you know, tunes that we can play with, a toolkit that we have, I think we can certainly take that one away and give it some further thought, particularly as you say with that squeezed middle, and I've certainly picked up on that theme at some of the consultation events that I've been to. So it hasn't been to date. We've been very focused on the proposals that are on the table, but I see no reason why we couldn't you know, have another look at what that might look like in the round. But again, workplace parking levy would require further consultation, and workplace parking levies are also required to be approved by the Secretary of State for Transport. They're under a different regime, so it's a very different sort of legislative process behind that. So it's an order of magnitude more complicated.
Thank you very much, Kerry. The next speaker is Councillor Healy.
Diana, can I just give a bit more information on that workplace parking thing?
If you can do it briefly, please, Dave.
Yeah, the reason, one of the other reasons for it being discounted is it didn't take traffic off the road, and we need to clear the roads.
Oh,
so it would just allow traffic to carry on using the city as normal.
Thank you very much for that. That's very helpful. Yeah. So Councillor Healy.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard, for the and Kerry for the presentation. That was really helpful. So I lead on equalities at the City Council, and the council responsible for that area. So I'm particularly interested in the inclusion in terms of the survey. So I understand that obviously we've had 12,000 respondents, which is really good, but I understand we haven't had so many from children and young people. And I just wanted to ask what efforts are being made to step up to ensure that we are getting that engagement before the survey closes. In particular, I would suggest going into sixth forums, or I think there's lots of ways we could be more active at reaching out to young people. Also, as hard as it is to believe, some people in the city aren't aware of it, which is really hard to believe. But if you're not on Facebook, if you're not reading the local papers, you wouldn't be aware of it. So can we do some other efforts, such as, I don't know, bus stops having QR codes where people can scan them, particularly for the elderly, the digitally excluded, and also for young people using buses that aren't reading papers like the Cambridge Independent or whatever that seems to have rolling coverage of it. So I think, it's really important if we can make those final efforts to just make sure that, we have really high numbers, but we need to make sure that they're inclusive numbers and they're diverse and representative of our population as a whole. And I also just wanted to finally touch upon minority communities. So have we made any efforts to reach them? So for example, in recent weeks, we've had fantastic cost of living pop-up events in places like the mosque, Cambridge Central Mosque. Can we do stuff like that? Maybe to kind of encourage, minority communities to ensure their voices are heard as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say when we started developing the consultation proposals, members were very clear about making sure we put every effort into trying to reach as many parts of the community as we possibly can. It's always a tough order. I know the comms team have been particularly focused on it this time round. I'll certainly feedback your concerns to make sure that we're putting all our efforts into it. I mean, with the best will in the world, it takes two to tango, if I can put it that way, and we do put tremendous effort into this. But I'll make sure that the comms team is aware of your concerns so that in the remaining days that we have, we can redouble our efforts wherever appropriate. I mean, Kerry, did you want to add to that?
I mean, I'll reassure you, Councillor Healy, that we are absolutely doing that now. You know, we're monitoring the sort of the statistics on the survey of who's, you know, age in particular, and we are light on young people, and it's really important because obviously they're the people that are going to sort of live with this for the longest. So we have redoubled our efforts already. So just to reassure you, we're calling them HIT squads, which perhaps is not the most helpful language, but the young people are going into schools, and young people are being sort of not ambassadors for the scheme, but all they're doing is trying to encourage engagement, because they're young people and they can talk to young people in the terms that young people understand, rather than, you know, fuddy-duddies like me going, oh, would you like to fill out a survey? So we've gone into the sixth form colleges, and the sixth form colleges, I forget which one, if it's Long Road or Hills Road, but they've set their sixth formers homework over the weekend to fill out the survey. So we should get a big slug of that. There's one of the other colleges is looking at it in their civics lesson, so it's being considered in that. So I think we're really trying to be innovative in the way that we're getting through to young people and engaging them. Shortly to happen, we're putting QR codes going on the back of bus seats across the area, so that when you're sat on the bus and you've got nothing to do, you can scan. And, you know, obviously this is for digitally enabled people, but you can sit there and fill out the survey. It'll take you straight to the survey and do it on your smartphone. So we're doing that. That you should see those rolling out in the next, I think, few days. Hopefully, we've done I think we've done 2 events at the mosque recently, and they are very supportive, because I think they have communities that come in from Peterborough in particular who struggle to park and who struggle to travel in. So they're very engaged. I did a site visit. We went to see the Blackwell Traveller site a few weeks ago, and we have one planned to go and visit the Fen Road Traveller site as well. So we really are trying. We're engaging as much as possible with carers, informal carers, voluntary services, community transport providers. We really are getting out there, and Citizens Advice Bureau as well we're talking to. So I think we're Transport for All, we're seeing the Federation of Small Businesses tomorrow morning. There's a list as long as my arm. So I'm just to reassure you that we really are trying our hardest. And we have got bus wraps, and there are signs on buses and signs at bus stops. It's not just about, you know, do you read the Cambridge Independent, or that we're trying. But clearly,
thank you very much for that. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah. The next question is from Councillor Bulat, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and all the engagement so far. On the topic of young people as well, I wanted to ask a similar question, but as a follow-up to that, I was wondering, how do you assess the engagement with universities so far and students? Because you spoke about colleges and schools, but I was just curious about how it is going so far with the universities, both with Cambridge and Anglia Ruskin students. I wanted to ask about the different, like how people respond in different areas. Do you have data on which areas need further focus? For example, do we know if there are lower responses in certain wards, so us as councillors can also refocus our efforts to engage more residents to respond if we have lower responses, say in my ward in Abbey compared to somewhere else, to do that, to get more leaflets out to encourage people to respond to consultation. And on the detail of the proposal, like on the presentation, I was wondering, because I did get a lot of requests, and I had a lot of conversations with people who volunteer for food banks, for like various groups, various charities, and I did note one of the reimbursements under the consultation is around large goods vehicles and minibuses potentially used by charities and volunteering groups. I was wondering, and it's just like I'm just curious why individual car journeys were included if it's a charitable purpose, because, for example, a lot of people who are doing charitable activities in my ward do carry like quite heavy materials with a larger car. That's not necessarily categorized as a minibus or like a heavy goods vehicle. So I was wondering if you had any engagement with volunteer groups and if they raised similar issues, because a lot of those groups actually provide services actually helping the county or the city council deliver some of their services as well, and it seems an area of interest for a lot of residents. So yeah, I was just wondering if you could comment on that. Thank you.
Kerry, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Universities, absolutely. I think Cambridge break up this week though, so I think we're we're nearly sort of maxing out on what we can achieve with that particular university population, I think. But we are still I think we're going to West Cambridge site next Wednesday, for example, and Anglia Ruskin as well, but you know, doing both. I think it's a great point about the geographic areas. I personally don't have access to the survey results, but I can certainly take that one back and see. I think it's a really good idea that if we are seeing low levels of representation in certain areas, then, and if, you know, with your help tackling that, I think that's a super idea. So certainly take that one back. The idea, so with all discounts, exemptions, reimbursements, is a balance between, you know, doing the right thing by people who are trying to do good work, fantastic work that, as you say, plugs gaps in social provision that, you know, the state can't provide for whatever reason. But it's a difficult one because, you know, obviously we don't want to burden the scheme with lots of administration, and nor do we want to burden charities with additional administration, because that stops them doing the good work that they're trying to do. But we want to make sure that the scheme is not open to fraud. So it's a real balance, and I think we have certainly heard that about people who are doing, you know, shopping for people, so they're sort of driving around in their own vehicles. So I think that's certainly an area that we need to look at in more detail, but it has been raised. So yes, it's on my to-do list, very much so.
Thank you very much. And now Councillor Smith.
Okay, well, thanks very much, and I'm very much speaking with my local councillor hat on today, but with my other hats, thank you very much for all the work you're doing, and obviously had some really interesting conversations around the survey already, and I'm very encouraged by a lot of the work that's being done for inclusion, so thank you for that, and I won't go through that again. But I did have a couple of questions that were a bit more specific to the local area. First of all, we've got some fantastic food hubs and warm spaces here. I wish we didn't need them, but as we do, they could be a really good place to see if we could get some. You clearly don't want to kind of impose too much on anyone that's coming, but on the other hand, I think that's a great place to meet a variety of local residents, be there in case people have questions and concerns, have some copies of the questionnaire perhaps available. From that point of view, it would be really good to know where in the city people can get paper copies, because as you said, not everybody is online, and if we want to really increase that involvement, it will be good for us as councillors to know where it is that people can go and get those paper copies, and whether there's anywhere locally that we can take some paper copies for people to make use of. I was thinking about, you mentioned about informal carers. This is clearly something quite close to my heart because I'm an unpaid carer myself. A lot of GP surgeries have text push systems or email push systems for their registered carers, and I wonder if it might be worth mentioning to the GP surgeries to get something out on that system. It's certainly not something my GP surgery have come to me about as an unpaid carer. Clearly I filled the survey in myself, but there may be many others that haven't, so I wonder if that might be one way we could address that. And I say this a lot, but it's something I hear a lot from other carers, is remember, when we're looking at the immunocompromised and their carers, it isn't just the issue of travelling to the hospital for treatment, it's any travel, because immunocompromised people and their close contacts cannot use public transport unless they're, you know, particularly if it's severe, because of the risk of picking stuff up. So that becomes really significant. Just two more things. First of all, thanks, Hannah, for raising the issue of going out of the city. I think that is something I've heard a lot from residents, people concerned if they are going against the traffic, living right on the edge of the zone, and there isn't anything appropriate in terms of public transport. So it's really good, Richard, to hear that positivity around kind of taking those points on board. And just more broadly, I want to reinforce to anybody that's listening into this that as local councillors, we are all listening, because one of the things that I've picked up is that there's a lot of people are worried that we're not. When I say a lot, I suspect more on social media than kind of more broadly, but I do get that question asked of me a lot on social media. Are you sure you're listening? And the answer is always yes, absolutely we are. But if there's an opportunity to reinforce that through the fact that this is a broadcast committee, then I just wanted to make that, because I think we are absolutely listening. It is absolutely worth filling in that consultation, because we will be looking at it really carefully. So sorry, a lot of questions there, but thank you both for coming and for the work you're doing.
Want me to go, Richard, or?
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, so food hubs, warm banks, agree. Shocking that they exist, but we have got a sort of roving community engagement specialist, and he has been trying to be at food banks, but obviously it's a sensitive thing, isn't it? People being at food banks, and there's a potential stigma associated with that. So I think we have to be very alive to that. But yes, it is a good place to meet people. So we're doing that, and we have been to I forget which one it was. Forgive me. We delivered some leaflets there, and they've offered to to give them out.
Sorry, could I just make one point of clarification? Food banks, I think, are probably, my personal feeling is a food bank is probably more difficult to get engagement in, because people are there for a shorter amount of time, and they tend to not have the same regular people coming week in, week out for months. Whereas the food hubs have got a more informal feel, and they've got a more regular clientele. So it might be worth approaching the hub network as well as the bank network.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm sure when we are tapped into that, but I will certainly take that back to the team. Paper copies of the brochure are available in libraries. I'm not sure if the surveys are there as well. So they're hard copies of the surveys. I can definitely check that and make sure that they are too. We are talking to GPs, so we can certainly check on that text push service that you mentioned, which I think is a really, really helpful way to reach more people, and absolutely noted around immunocompromised people who just public transport isn't a viable option for them. So there are some very tricky areas within this that need quite a degree of thought, and that is certainly one of them. Is that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that all the points covered, Anna? I think Councillor Smith, I think that is. Thank you very much. And Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. I do have 3 points, but I'll try and be as quick as I can. The first one's more of an observation. Most of the contact I've had from disabled residents not only shows that they're not aware of the disability exemptions, but also, and much more worryingly, not one of the ones who've contacted me have been accessing their full disability benefits. And I'd really just asking fellow councillors to be aware of Taxi Card, that the blue badge qualification system is a lot wider than people think it is, and also about specialist advice and support for personal independence payments. And I'm happy to do an email afterwards if other councillors would find that helpful. But I really am concerned and worried as to how many disabled residents are going into the winter cost of living without the full benefits that they should have.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for our
I do have
presenters?
questions, but I was just stopping because I'd reached the end of point 1. My questions are, residents are very concerned about the economic impact of the charges, and I wanted to ask a question that the FSB is probably going to ask when Kerry sees them, which is, have you considered discounts for smaller businesses, perhaps tied to small business rate relief? And my third question is that I cannot help but notice that the administrative costs are very high for the scheme. And I wondered if a prepayment season ticket, that could be a tick box form attached to the annual council tax demands, would be an excellent option for both reducing the payment costs, protecting residents from concerns about missing payments and incurring fines, and also justifying a small discount to residents that would sweeten the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. over to you, Richard.
Well, I think Kerry is probably better placed.
Oh, okay. Yes, thanks, Kerry.
Nice to see you again, Councillor Bennett. I think we met at the Abbey Stadium, didn't we? And we did talk about the fact that there are a lot of people who are not accessing the correct benefits, which is, awful and a shame. And I think if this scheme were to go ahead in the run up to the introduction of the scheme, we would certainly be working with groups that are eligible for things like that to say this is coming, and in order to help you manage it or to avoid the charge altogether, these are the range of things that are available to you, like a blue badge or personal independence payment, etc., that we could work with people and make sure that they do get the entitlement that they're due. And that's a broader responsibility across the whole picture of social care provision, isn't it, as well? So it's not just the GCP. I think that's an excellent idea on the small business rates relief, because wherever possible we need to tie any discounts or exemptions to existing criteria that exist that are independently verified by somebody else. Clearly, if we start making up thresholds for payments or discounts, we are adding to that administrative cost that you mentioned, Councillor Bennett. So we're very keen to avoid that wherever possible. So if there are existing things that we can link to, then we should absolutely use that. And I think ditto the idea of some sort of prepayment ticket for a council tax. The cheapest way to run the scheme is for everyone to be on an account, which is what happens for a lot of these types of schemes. You have an account, the money automatically comes off. If people are registered as an account, we can play lots of tunes with potentially free trips or discounted trips, or people might even be able to say if somebody was immunocompromised, they would get a certain number of trips, and then they could gift those trips to somebody who was serving their needs. So there are a variety of things that we can do within the auspices of getting people signed up to an account. So I think those are two excellent things that we can take away and add to that consideration. Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. And the final question is Councillor Howat.
You nearly called me by my first name now.
I think I nearly slipped
really
up there.
Terrible, don't I? Oh, did it myself. Thank you to Kerry and Richard, and Richard's been very helpful to me since I've been elected, so nice to see you. This is my question. It's natural and very welcome that different groups mobilise around this and put their views in, but there are two main groups that seem to be really lobbying on it: the Alliance for Sustainable Transport, who we all know who they are and how they're funded, and the Cambridge Residents Group, which has no transparency on how it's funded as far as I know. And I do think, in terms of having a fair and democratic debate about this, anybody who's doing lobbying and campaigning about this should be transparent on where their funding is coming from. And I hope that either the City Council or the County Council or some combination of us could look at that.
I think that's probably a question for us rather than Richard and Kerry, actually. But thank you for raising that point, Richard. Councillor, oh, sorry, I'm getting tired, I think. So I thank you so much for that presentation. It was really clear, really helpful. Lots really good to know how much you're doing to engage as many residents as possible. And I hope that you found our input helpful as well. And also that we are all doing our best to publicise this consultation and to get as many people taking part, so that we have a really fair and open consultation that speaks for the people of Cambridge and Cambridgeshire. So thank you ever so much for coming along. And if we have any other queries, I assume we can email you any other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So agenda item 7 is our environmental improvement programme. Is anybody would like a short break before we move on? Are you okay to plough on, everyone? Great. Thank you very much then. So I'd like to welcome John Richards and also James Ogle, I believe. Thank you, Project Officer, for the report. Now, the spreadsheet is very small on my screen, but I'm wondering if it would be helpful to if you are you able to share it, James, so that as we talk through, that people can see. So if you'd like to just speak and give us your report, and then I'm going to ask Councillor Robertson to lead on this, because he's been very helpful in sorting out some of the things that we think may be an issue.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'll lead off if that's okay.
Yes.
So good evening, everybody. For those new councillors who won't have seen us run an environmental improvement programme report before, I'm the officer who sort of leads the overall programme development and delivery, and this time round I've been supported by James, who's been doing a lot of the detailed work. So just to give a bit of background, the council has been running a programme of environmental improvements now for well over a decade. And this is about delivering meaningful improvements to our streets and open spaces across the city. And we use it to support other forms of programme funding, capital funding that the council provides, including sort of Section 106 contributions, and also the local highways improvement programme that's offered by Cambridgeshire County Council on an annual basis. But the programme has been subject to periodic review over that time to make sure it remains fit for purpose. In 2019, we established a strategic block of funding to look at needs across the city holistically, based on a lot of similar ideas that were coming forward from the different area committees. So we felt there was some sort of sense in trying to group those together and deliver those more as a sort of joined up programme. And that element of the programme is currently funded at £70,000 of the 170 that's provided for the year for the total programme. We have a secondary block, which is the one that's allocated between the 4 local areas for local area schemes, and that one's funded at £100,000 per year, and it's shared between the 4 areas based on the proportion of population within those areas. Most recently, in last year, actually in 2021, we undertook a review of the programme itself, and we tried to benchmark it against other councils across the country who were offering similar programmes, to see how well we fared and whether there were any lessons that we could learn from the way other authorities did it. And that we found that they had a mix of both capitally funded programmes and revenue funded programmes. So of course ours is capitally funded, so it needs to be primarily about infrastructure enhancement, infrastructure creation and enhancement. But one of the things that we did find was that other councils were much better at reaching out and engaging directly with communities. So we've tried to adapt this time round and actually utilise the new Citizens Lab platform that the council has adopted this year for all its public consultation and engagement work. So we've used that tool this year, and it has added some additional information to what we receive with the scheme applications. So one of the things that people can do, and obviously people can, members of the public can see or can go onto the system and see also what requests have come forward from other people within local areas as well, and they have the opportunity to sort of rate or give a flag or a thumbs up or a thumbs down as to whether they support some of the other ideas that have come forward too. So we found that quite helpful this year. The other thing I would say, Chair, is that due to the impact of the pandemic in 2020, we had to not stop the programme, but we did have to take the foot off the gas slightly in terms of delivery for the resource pressures that the pandemic brought, both in terms of financial resources and helping to plug the gap that the council found it in, but also in terms of staffing resources that needed to be diverted to other areas. So we are picking the programme up again, starting, as I say, with the review that we did last year. And we felt it appropriate this year to go out and invite another round of project applications, which we've done again through Citizens Lab. And in the meantime, delivery has continued on the programme of schemes that we adopted in the 2019-2020 cycle. So there has been some delay to the delivery of some of those, but we are getting back up to speed on those again now. And in the report, there is a link in case any councillors wish to see an update on how we're getting on with progress for those previously adopted schemes, they can look at the link in the report, and hopefully that will direct them to the page on the website where they can see that status update. So in East Area, I think you have a budget of just short of, well, the share of the £100,000 for local area funds. I think your share is just under about £28,000. What we've tried to do, and I would stress this is very much a sort of an initial desk-based sort of response, just given the timescales that we've been working to on this application round, is, as we've done before, we've tried to rate each of the suggestions that have come forward in terms of its fit with the programme and its objectives and eligibility criteria, and also the sort of the core objectives of the council. And also give an indication as to delivery complexity. And we've tried to sort of wrap that up in a sort of a red, amber, green rating, which we've indicated in the report for you to try and give you a bit more guidance. And we've tried to estimate where we can the likely costs of projects. So some of those cost estimates that have been provided have come from the individual applicants. They've asked for a specific level of funding. But others where applicants haven't filled that in, I think James and myself have tried to give a bit of an estimate based on the information that we've received. So, but as I say, Chair, this is very much a sort of an initial response really to the suggestions that have come forward. And I very much welcome input from local councillors who I'm sure know these issues much better than we do, and probably can add really valuable insight to it. So. And excuse me, Chair, my voice is really struggling this evening. So unless James has anything to add, we'd very happily take questions.
No, I don't have anything to add.
No?
I know,
Fine.
well, one thing I do have, sorry, I do have something to add. Councillor Robertson has looked at the projects that I sent out from, which obviously showed the green ones and then the green amber ones and against the funding. And he's done a lot of work on that. And I think the chair's intimated that probably this group can look at that, probably following the questions and any sort of talk about different projects that might help. I think it was very useful.
Yes, thank you very much.
I think that's what you wanted. Yeah.
Yeah. So just to be absolutely clear, tonight, are you expecting, I mean, I'm assuming that we need to try and, because there's far more projects here than we have money for. So the request is that we sort of hone in on the ones that and make them fit into the amount that we actually have to spend. And are you expecting us to sort of make a specific choice this evening? Or
I think it's just a general recommendation, which then we would take on to the Executive Councillor to make a decision. I believe the Executive Councillor will be listening in just so she knows what people have discussed, so it can help her decision as well. But I mean, obviously, we will then take forward what we feel this group has suggested to us to her, and then obviously she would make a decision at that point sometime next week.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. So do we have any general questions? And then I'm going to ask Councillor Robertson to talk to us. Councillor Copley. You're muted, Councillor Copley.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to thank John and James for all of the ongoing environment improvement projects. They're some of the most popular things that have happened in Abbey Wood, particularly the wildflower patches that have appeared. I wanted to ask three short questions. One was noting that of the green rated projects, and to some extent the green amber, it was disproportionately projects submitted by councillors, which were very highly rated. And so there were lots of residents who were coming up with ideas and putting them in, and they were being marked against a criteria that councillors, it seems, were better able to kind of design schemes, many of which came from residents' ideas to fit. So I was trying to think like what we could do maybe in future to try and get more residents' ideas result in schemes that would fit the criteria. And I was wondering about which I'm sure we can discuss later or at another meeting, about having, say, like physical events, like please come and discuss your idea for how to make the area better, with like a picture that might have all the different options. So maybe people could come along and then design a scheme together with the councillors there and or with the with the officers there as well, to like work out like what would be a really good scheme, so that residents could really feel that like they personally designed it and put it in themselves, and it was led by them. And then the second question is slightly different, but I know that there's a really good like Trees for Streets project where residents can fund their own trees, and obviously we've got a really tight budget for this kind of thing, but if a resident did want to either individually or as a group, say, fund a wildflower patch for an area, would that be a possibility? And or what could residents do to, say, get permission? Say they just said, I want to plant, I don't know, like 50 daffodil bulbs on this area of land. You know, who could they speak to say, you know, who do I need to get permission with to do it? And, you know, make, say, an agreement to make sure it's done in a safe way, etc. So I really like that we are moving towards more resident engagement on these ideas. And I wonder if we can do that, you know, in a way that would let funding constraints, you know, be less applied. Sorry, that was quite long.
Thank you, though. Would you like to just answer that last point, John, to say who do we go to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly in terms of where residents are able to sort of help with both delivery and funding. If there are offers of either, we're very happy to sort of have that conversation with them and try and sort of accommodate that. I think that's a very welcome move and something we'd really try to support. In terms of sort of advice and permissions, our team are available to help with that. In some instances, where these areas might be on public highway, then we'd probably need to engage also with County Council Highways colleagues just to make sure that they're comfortable with the idea. And what they're normally concerned about is, for planted areas, is things about obstruction to visibility displays and those sorts of things, and also requirements for maintenance and those sort of things going forward. So if there's a local community group that are going to help keep help with the upkeep of the area, and that it's not an additional burden then to County Council Highways sort of maintenance funds, then that's something that they're generally relatively comfortable with. In terms about the question about engagement, I think again, you know, we've changed the process a little bit this year and tried to be a bit more engaging with people directly. And I think that the point, Councillor Copley, about within East, that it seems to be primarily councillor-led requests that have sort of been rated green. That does just seem to be a sort of a pattern for East. It doesn't seem to have come across in the other areas to the same degree. So I think it's really.
Though, can I add something, John?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it is a pattern for the area-based projects, but actually 3 of the strategic projects that put forward from East are green rated, and they add up to, I think it's £25,000, which is almost as much as the whole area one.
And those are local resident
it's kind of
suggestions.
Yeah, it's local resident suggestions. Yeah, add up to £25,000 from the strategic, which are rated green. So yeah, I can see it looks skewed from the area perspective, but maybe they haven't really seen the ones that have been put forward to the strategic as well, just to try and balance it.
Thank
John,
you.
you're on mute now.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're very happy to keep reviewing what we do, and if we can improve the programme within the resources that we've got, we're very happy to do that. I think that the challenge for us is really resources, and you know, we really have struggled to deliver the projects that we've that we've committed to in the past. So I am very, very mindful of our resource pressures, but it is important that, you know, one of the difficulties that we've had in the past, and where we have struggled to deliver some schemes, it has been where perhaps not enough work has been put in up front to actually define what the scheme is about, and making sure that it actually is going to be relatively straightforward and easy to deliver and has local support. So if we can actually get that work done up front, I think that's probably going to help us in the long term. So very good points. Thank you for offering those.
Great, thanks. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. Yes, I'll comment on that last matter before I go on to the other areas. Well, there are, of course, hidden schemes within which have been put forward by councils, but actually reflect demand from local communities. I can tell you that the 2 bench seats for Petersfield Green were the result of several meetings with residents in the area. It certainly wasn't just me on my own, I assure you. So I think you've got to recognise that. Anyway, is it possible to have the spreadsheet of projects put up? What I'm going to propose that we do 2 things. One is to concentrate on the green and amber schemes and see if we can fund all of them. The green ones are fairly easily cleared, but if we manage to fund all the green and amber ones as well, it will be very helpful. So if you can move down, you'll see in columns H and I a revised revision of the estimated costs and running total, and there's some proposals for some changes. And the first one is E3, green the streets in Petersfield. It turns out that we still have 4,000 left from this year's project budget for greening the streets, which was a pilot project. And if we carry that forward, we don't need all of the 5,000 that we were needing for the whole scheme to continue next year. So therefore, we can reduce the demand on the budget by 4,000 down to 1,000. And that enables us to go further down the list of green and amber projects. And secondly, on E27, no, not E27, E12, that 4,200, I've been discussing with the residents who put that one forward, and it's been agreed it could be scaled down a bit and still produce a really good scheme by removing some. They wanted to build some planters above the root system, very protruding root system of this tree, and it's an expensive way of doing it because you have to have the planter raised up above the roots with silts. So if we remove that, and that would reduce that by 1,400. So we're putting forward those 2 proposals, and the third one is E14, which is the Eagle Street and Headley Street, which is part of the Ironworks project, where I don't know enough about the detail of this one, and the proposal was to reduce it to 500. But if the officers feel that's too much, then perhaps it should be 1,500.
Yeah, I think the items in blue writing are what we've suggested as officers.
Sorry, yes, I meant to comment. I meant to mention that. So I wrote some comments in, and then James added his in blue. This achieves us getting to down to 31,500. Well, actually, no, we've got to put 1,000 back onto E14.
No, it's there. Yeah.
And we need to think about what else we can do to achieve. The other areas proposal I have is that each of the 4 wards gets a reasonable share of the pot. I think this is a normal process that we don't think it's fair to load any one ward with too much of the resources, but to spread them reasonably evenly. And at the moment, it's slightly unbalanced, not in terms of numbers of projects, but 1 or 2 of the expensive projects are in 1 or 2 of the wards. We need to review that. So I've so far brought forward several proposals to reduce the demand from Petersfield, but we do need to reduce the demand from some other wards if we're going to achieve getting the budget completed with 28,000, just under 28,000, and get them all done. That last one on Peveril Road was accidentally omitted from the original report, but it is obviously an important scheme for the Abbey area. So that's as far as I'll go for now. We want to see what other people think about their wards bids and see if we can achieve getting all of these projects through down as far as E27.
Thank you, Richard. So to look at the green bids first of all. If we're looking at the actual financial amounts, they're not evenly spread. So I wonder if there's one from Coleridge who would feel they could offer anything, because you have by far the largest chunk of the resources on the green based projects in comparison to the other wards, and in particular it's E16 that we wondered if that could be reduced, perhaps saved for another year. Does anyone have any views on that? Councillor Moore.
Sorry, I actually am not the right person to talk about that, because I wanted to raise one further down, E25. So maybe you have your conversation about E16 and then come back to me.
Okay, yeah, E25. Oh yes, yeah. Okay. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the costs on E16, I took advice on the costings. This is the project, one of the projects I submitted. So, you know, I would have no issue at all with talking to officers again about whether it would take slightly less money than that. This is a scheme that has been proposed, though, for quite a few years now. There's been a lot of concerns raised around the naming of Rustat Road, but the residents really don't want to change the road name. It will be quite complicated because there's not just Rustat Road, there's Rustat Avenue and there's Rustat Place. So this is really reflecting quite a lot of discussions with residents. I'd be quite concerned about putting that into a future year, because it is something that's been on the agenda for quite a bit of time. I'd be more than happy to go back to officers and talk about the costings of that, whether that's something that we could potentially discuss, maybe take that costing down a little bit. It's the lectern and the site, it's the information part that is the core part of that bid as far as I'm concerned. If there's an opportunity to reduce some of the other aspects of it, that's obviously a shame, but biodiversity is going to be enhanced wherever it is across the area. So I think it's the uniqueness of that information part that I'd personally want to see retaining, and think residents would too.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think we can probably leave it at that you will look at that and see if you can. I don't think we can go any further than that, really, to see, just to bear in mind then that Coleridge has three totaling £9,000, which is a much larger chunk than the other wards for those green projects. I think Councillor Bennett wanted to speak.
Sorry, I just had a question as to which of the Cambridge abolitionists this was.
I could speak very briefly. I will try
Very
to
please.
because this is an item of quite a lot of interest. It gets the historian in me kind of getting excited here. But this is to an abolitionist called Alexander Crummell. He is the first recorded. He's the first black student who is recorded as having taken a degree at Cambridge. Doesn't necessarily mean he was the first to get a degree, but he's the first that is recorded having done so. He was an American minister, came to England to study, was really strong in the abolitionist cause, so has a strong link to Cambridge, and is clearly a really important offset to Tobias Rustat, who is memorialised in those street names. So he's someone that is utterly deserving of some recognition within the city, in my opinion, because he's almost been forgotten, and he really shouldn't be at all.
Thank
you. That's really helpful. One of the reasons I asked, because the identity of the abolitionist might open up some other opportunities for funding. And I'd quite like to think about that and perhaps get back to you after the meeting, Anna.
Thank you.
Obviously, if there's ways it can be funded, sorry, through you, Chair.
That's
very,
fine.
very happy to talk further if there's ways it can be funded elsewhere, but just don't want this to kind of disappear because it's quite an important one for the residents, I feel.
The one thing I think I should check as we work through is, first of all, if there's anybody who objects to any of the ones that are marked in green. I've not heard anybody, so I think we can agree on that we all of those we're happy to support, and that just E16 then we'll look at reducing, if possible, the amount. Councillor Moore, should we go on to your one next?
Yes, please. So mine comes from a resident. It's been marked as green amber, and I'd just like to find out what can be done, because so it's E25. It's anyone that's ever been to the leisure park or along Cherry Hinton Road would have gone past it. There's a really big verge kind of next to Tesco and Cheffins, and it's got 4 trees planted in it. And cars have repeatedly, or vans have repeatedly parked on it, and it's really damaged. I did apply for an LHI last year and didn't get it because the way it's changed, it has to go through the county councillor, and we don't have a county councillor for Coleridge now. So,
well, you do.
Well, we don't. We got 3, and we haven't got one that supports that project there. And it's a really large space that is just, it looks awful, and obviously it's not very good for the trees having big what are they called, like holes in the ground, and it could be a really nice space. It's quite a sort of, it's not the most beautiful part of Cambridge, and it could just really add to it with some planting there. So I appreciate that there's not money in this round probably, but I just wonder what can be done. If I've applied for LHI, no. Apply for EIP, no. What's next? What can be done? And as I say, this has come from residents requesting it. Thank you.
So there are 2 other funds that are in the offing, but I don't know an awful lot about them yet, except that I know that the team have applied to Natural England for funding, and also the community engagement team, and it sort of sounds to me like something that maybe the community engagement team could possibly look at. They come on. They've done things like the boxes outside the co-op on Mill Road on the Romsey side. Small projects. It depends how big it is, but it might be worth asking them if that's something they could do. I'm a little bit concerned, Councillor Moore, that's yet another project for Coleridge, who really have a larger slice of the pie at the moment than any of the other wards.
Chair, if I may, I don't know
Please
if
do,
Councillor Moore is aware, but the County Council are inviting another round of local highways improvements applications now, so it might be worth talking to them again about that suggestion of maybe trying to achieve something there through local highways improvements. I know the County Council have changed their process a little bit since last year, so it may well be that I suppose what I'm saying is if it wasn't successful before, it doesn't necessarily mean it might not be successful in a further round. So, and I think in terms of environmental improvements, and the reason why we haven't rated it as green here is that we have found great difficulty where we've tried to solve parking problems using the environmental improvement programme, because they really are really difficult problems to resolve, and it's much more sort of the remit of county council colleagues, I think, to try and sort of address those difficulties rather than our EIP fund. I think there's other things that we can do that have generally better value, I think, in terms of adding to the other things that other organisations and other partners are doing themselves. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, yeah, can I recommend that you contact Councillor Neil Shaler, because he is a Coleridge councillor, county councillor. I'm not sure which part of Coleridge this comes under, whether it comes under his part, but he's also been on the responsible for the redrafting of the LHI bids as well.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Can I just check if it was presumably LHIs wouldn't do planting, would they? That's one question. And if they don't, would it be possible if they did say yes this time to bollards, could it come back for planting? Or are you saying go for the community engagement team?
John,
Chair,
are you?
Yeah, Chair, I think we could. The issue is we don't really want to be funding bollards or verge protection measures through fences and bollards and those sorts of things through environmental improvements. That's very much more the role of like local highways improvements. But having done that and protected the area, then if there's an opportunity for us to do different things with that environmental amenity area via planting or whatever, I'm sure that's the sort of thing that we could look to accommodate through this programme, or again Wendy Johnson's community engagement programme. So yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility.
Great, thank you very much.
Oh, that's great, thank you. So if we move on to the green and amber section, I mean, I'm this is new to me as well, and if you feel that there's a better way of looking at this, please, I'm quite happy to take suggestions, but I'm assuming that this is the best way to approach this. So if we look at the green and amber items, because I think that, you know, there is still some money left in our little pot. Does anybody want to speak particularly in favour of that? I mean, as I'm speaking, I do want to mention the Sedgwick Street scheme, because this is a scheme that's been quite a long time waiting for funding, and an awful lot of work has gone in from residents. So I'm very hopeful that that can be supported this time round. And that's £2,500, isn't it? Which will make a huge difference to a street that has no trees and very little green on it.
Chair, if I may, I think with the revised sort of estimates that Councillor Robertson has put forward, it seems as though you can probably afford to do all of those green amber rated projects bar one. Having said that, one of the things that we are asking area committees to do is also agree some or prioritise some reserve schemes.
Oh, that sounds good.
So if it, you know, I think any one of those that wasn't to be within your sort of preferred recommended list for the executive councillor could go onto the reserve list, just in case there is funding, you know, in other areas that isn't fully committed, and you know that there is a decision considered to maybe move funding from one area to another. We're asking people to consider that, so we don't have to come back to you asking for a further decision.
Oh, that's
Thank you,
great.
Chair.
Thank you very much. Yes. So are we more or less saying then that we are happy to agree the green and amber? Is anybody would like to speak on that? I can see Councillor Thornborough would like to speak.
Yes, John, do you have an idea about what might be covered in the strategic fund next year? It's just, I think there was some discussion in the past that benches and seating there may be a strategic review about benches and seating, and then in the city, and then that would have been a good time to suggest benches and seating. I've based on what residents have asked me, I submitted the one about the Gwydir Street seating. It's a very long road, and I could explain why I put it in. But if we knew what the strategic, if there was a plan for what might be happening next year for the strategic fund, then we could modify what, you know, our priorities for this year's fund. Thanks.
Yes, we have tried to broaden the sort of types of things that we consider through the strategic funding element to include those sort of community facilities that help with community cohesion. So things like street benches and benches in parks and notice boards and those sorts of things, which have always been popular as sort of local requests. I think we have opportunity to consider those within the strategic block. But one of the things that I'm finding is that the more we seek to broaden the strategic element to do more and more, it's just becoming very similar coverage to the local area pots anyway. So I think one of the things that we might want to reflect on at the end of this process is actually how well it's worked this time for us, and actually whether we need to sort of adjust things going forward. But James, I think you have a list, don't you, of the strategic or proposed strategic funded schemes within East Area. So Chair, I wonder if it might be useful just to show you those as well, so you can see those that are being covered.
Yes, please, it would be.
It is actually in the report, but I'll open the report. This is still the area, so I'm just going down the report here. So these are the submissions of projects, ideas for East Area from the strategic. I mean, as you see, the first two are from local residents, and the first one is green. So there's I think there's 5. So there's those 3. I don't intend to talk through them because they've been part of the report, and then there's another 2 here. Improve tree cover on Hobart Road and create community gardens on Tiverton Estate. Now that's quite a lot of the 70,000. If you were to take all the greens and green ambers, for example, that would probably almost cover the full 70,000 of strategic, which is meant to be across the city. And if you just took the greens, I think it's 25, 10, 5, yeah, 25, which is still quite a high proportion, but they may all get approved, the green ones. The others I'm not sure, because we are overcommitted against the strategic as well, although obviously they are rated differently from all different areas. Is there anything else you want me to say on strategic, or with that
what
being?
Sort of input would you like us to be giving to you on these strategic ones? I mean, they all look very worthy, and I mean, I know from the ones in Romsey that it's things that residents have talked to me about that are very much needed. But so,
is there any argument, I suppose, against well, not argument or suggestion that the RAG rating is wrong? I suppose, because I mean, obviously, if they're green, they're more likely to get funded, dependent on the Executive Council's decision.
Can I just ask what the reason was for giving an amber rating to E10 then, rather than a green rating? Was there a reason for it?
Yeah, there was. Just a minute, I've got another spreadsheet which I'm not going to. Oh, you can see it. Ha! That's not a major problem, but can I open it somewhere else? No, it's not. Let me do that. Maybe I just unshare a second. E10. Oh, it's strategic, isn't it? Apologies. I'm getting there. E10. The reason why it's amber, it's well supported, deliverable, meets the EIP objectives. There may be other funding sources available. I think is it? Oh yeah, tree pits are high cost generally, and I suppose the value for money for one tree will cost at least £5,000 in the urban environment. I mean, one tree is great, but just looking at the cost benefit, I think, and other funding potentially available from the tree funding we have across the city.
Right.
So that's why it's amber.
Yeah. We've reached a point now where we've got green, we've got the green and amber. There's just an issue about E27, which I know that Councillor Bennett wants to speak on. But before we go to that, then on the strategic items, is there any more input that you want from us?
No.
No, thank you.
Unless
Good.
there is any.
I'm not sure that. Or is there anyone else who wants to speak on the strategic items? Yeah, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thanks. I suspect it's the same answer, but I just want to check because that's the same issue that you've talked about in terms of Coldham's Lane with the Hobart one.
Yeah.
So very similar to what Councillor Pounds is saying, this is something that's really important to residents, and the issue in Hobart is there were tree pits, or there certainly were trees, and over time they've gone, and residents will point to where the trees were and really want to see those back. So I guess the question I would have is, where would the alternative sources of funding be for this, and how do we ensure, and I guess this is also the same for Councillor Pounds' query as well, how do we ensure that we do get those trees restored to those streets?
John, I don't know if you I think it's the amount of funding we've got as well is difficult. That's one of the obviously balancing acts we've got to do, and maybe they've just been pushed out a little bit that way. And there is money amongst, you know, for trees across the city. There's various pots, and we will be passing on these projects to the arboriculturalists to consider in their programs. But anyway, John probably knows a bit more.
Yeah, I could probably help with this. So that there was established a new £200,000 of capital funding spread over 4 years to try and help support the canopy cover project, which is actually now winding up across Cambridge, but it's intended very much to fill gaps within street corridors, within the overall sort of canopy area of the city. So I know Matt McGrath, who leads our sort of arboricultural team, has been looking very, very carefully at the priorities for that, and he has got certainly, I think the first year has been fully funded and fully completed now, with a number of different streets supported, DeFrevel Avenue being one. There's been quite a bit actually on the sort of the north side of the city. That there are some new street trees going in on the corner of Mill Road and Cavendish Road as well, to replace the ones that were unfortunately lost there a few years ago. Might only be one tree there, beg your pardon. But
yeah, looking at Coleridge, is it Coleridge Road? The one
there is a scheme coming for Coleridge Road to try and make a meaningful difference along Coleridge Road, and I think what Matt is trying to do is use this as a bit of a sort of a kickstart to try and levy in sort of grant funding from external partners to continue the programme. So you know, we have been supporting it with environmental improvement programme, of course, where we can. But one of the challenges that both he and we face in EIP is really the cost of doing these things. And as James said, a really successful tree pit can be anything from between £5,000 and £10,000. You know, the cost of the tree is only about £100 or £200, but the underground works that are needed. And I think Chair Matt has suggested that when we do the planting at Cavendish Corner, he actually would like to use that as a bit of an opportunity to do some promotion work with the local community, to really try and sort of raise understanding about the sort of some of the complexities involved with this and the work that's involved as well. So
yep, and I'm very much supportive of that. In fact, it was my suggestion, but but that apart, I think it'd be an absolutely nice thing, you know, for the community, because it is like the central point, the Romsey are for the community. I would just like to say that on Coldham's Lane, I've been through all this with Matt before, and what he did do for us this year, and which might be interesting to you, Councillor Smith, is because we couldn't find the money for the trees, he gave us the residents could have a free shrub or a large shrub or tree for their front garden, and which a few residents have took the offer up, and they just were delivered this week, and they're absolutely delighted. So they've actually, although they haven't got the trees on their streets because it's as you know, a terribly busy road, they have got more shrubs and planting for their front gardens, which all helps with improving air quality and giving them some protection from the traffic. So that was kind of an interim thing, but obviously the proper street trees, there's a big gap in the middle of Coldham's Lane, same, I think, you know, where trees have gone, that just needs filling in again. So I think it's something, but perhaps for another time now, that we need to follow up with you, John, and see, you know, it's going to be a longer term thing, isn't it? But it's something that we really do want to keep going. Okay. Should we
Can I
leave
just comment something? What to do
Pardon?
with this? Could I just make a comment
Yes,
on
please
this
do.
matter?
Yes.
You've got to remember that when you talk about trees on roads, you're actually normally talking about in verges.
Yeah.
And there, where an expensive tree pit is unlikely. It can happen, but it's unlikely. It's when you dig a hole in a road to put a tree in a road, that's where the really expensive tree pits come in, as I understand it.
Unfortunately, if
So,
I understood Matt correctly, we have to have these tree pits wherever they go on the roadside now because of the fibre networks. That was what my take on it was. Am I right, James? Is that on that, or is that?
Well, it is a lot to do with services. You get quite a lot of services in the verges, which obviously then you have to dig around and try and make a pit, a reasonable pit, so the tree can survive. If you put trees sometimes straight into the hard landscape, they will be much more unlikely to survive. So they'll probably die after a year.
Yeah.
Whatever you do, if you water them, or but if they're in a pit, they've got much more likelihood of growing to maturity.
Sure.
Chair, it's also about the damage that the roots can do to underground services and trying to protect apparatus and those sorts of things. So what's often done if there are services there is that growing space for the roots is given away from the services. So you try and sort of deflect the roots to go in the other direction so the tree gets the support it needs. But it's growing in areas where there aren't services and the damage isn't going to be caused.
But also away from damaging the highway,
yeah,
which is obviously a concern of the county council, and it's usually county council verges that we're putting them in.
Thank you very much. I'm getting a little concerned about the time. So if we can move just back to the last green amber thing. I know that Councillor Bennett wanted to talk because there's a recommendation that Peveril Road could be reduced. I expect that's probably what Councillor Bennett would like to comment on. I'm thinking in terms now of our reserve list for the if there's anything left over. Councillor Bennett.
Hello, I'll start with V27 if I may, which Alex Spilat has put a lot of work into. I know that Alex has already cut this once, and I think her intention is to do little projects on the same site over a number of years. So I do think it would be possible to trim it down and phase it possibly over 3 years. I don't know if Alex is still on the call.
Yes, I am, and I do agree. I think what's needed in Peveril overall is something much larger than a small grant would. This grant is purpose is for, but actually starting with something small is actually quite good. I mean, if for those of you who are not familiar with the area, there's a green space which is currently not really a green space anymore because it's only kind of mud and puddles because of the car parking in the area, but there's a really big beautiful tree, and residents are quite concerned that the tree is damaged and the roots are damaging as well. So actually having something small to start with to protect the tree and add some biodiversity could be good. So yeah, thank you, Naomi, for that comment. And sorry to interrupt you, just wanted to say I agree.
No, that's actually what I wanted you to say, Alex. Basically, what I'm saying is that, like Alex, I would be very sorry to see that missed out together, but I think we could still do something sensible with a smaller budget. I also had a quick comment about E2, which is the wider street seating. As a disabled woman, I'm very, very supportive of public seating, but I do know that quite often residents have concerns if the area is associated with antisocial behaviour and antisocial drinking. So I just wanted to ask before we go ahead on that, have residents been specifically consulted about that aspect of it? Because there's nothing worse than going to all the effort to put seating in and then have residents complain that they want it taken out again.
Councillor Thornberry?
Yes, Councillor Bennett, the request came from residents themselves because it is a very long road and it links a more deprived area with the Mill Road, which is the community focus. So that's the request came from residents about needing to stop and have a rest as they go along. But it's also quite a lot of people going up and down. So I hope there wouldn't be, it wouldn't cause antisocial behaviour, I hope. But it was a residents focused request. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thornborough. And just one more very quick point. SE13, which is an Abbey People project. I just wanted to point out that that's really good value for money because they're doing quite a lot of work themselves. So, and that I think is everything that I wanted to say. Thank you very much for putting up with me.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bennett. So I know that Councillor Collis is listening and taking account of what we're saying. Are there any other projects, because we're almost out of time now, that people feel should go onto the reserve list? Is there any other comments that anybody would like to make about what we've done this evening? I think we've made our wishes fairly clear now, and I think we've covered everything that I can think of, but you may have something else. Has there anybody got anything else to say? In which case, yes, over to you, John. Is there anything else that we should have done that we haven't done?
Well, I think we still need to know of those. If you're happy to support all the Greens being reported to the Executive Council as being your agreed priorities for East area, and then of the green and amber ones, you've got 6 there, but within the funding that you've got available, there isn't sufficient to do all of them. So at least 1 or possibly 2 of those need to go onto the reserve list. So it's that direction we really need from you, Chair, as to which of those you feel are the lesser priorities and should go onto the reserve list.
Right, so Richard has marked up 3 that he thinks could be reduced. Yep. Does that, is everybody happy that?
So that, Chair, so
that
helps, but it still means you still can't afford to do all 6, I'm afraid.
No.
The column on the right is the running total. You've got just short of £28,000. So at the moment you're about 4,000 over committed if you look to do all of those green ambers. So you need to reduce by about £4,000.
Right. So I'm looking at that and looking at the spread of wards. Petersfield is overrepresented there because there's 4 Petersfield projects. Petersfield councillors, is there something there that you feel could go onto the reserve?
Well, the problem is we've already reduced 3 of them.
Yeah.
To recognise I think we need some offers from other wards.
Yeah.
Sorry, I put my hand up, and if I have to speak in the chat, can I speak?
Oh, thank you. Yes, please, Councillor Healy.
I was going to suggest, why don't we just divide it equally, the savings between all 6 projects? So it would be about £600 off each of them, and then we can do all of them.
What do you think?
So just divide up the savings needed between all 6 of the Green Amber projects.
Could we put forward that as a suggestion? But if you're taking 600 off each, if that money goes into the reserve and say actually we want to do those projects fully, as we've suggested with the reductions, and the reserve gets, if there is some reserve money there, that would take up that, and then you could actually just deliver to what we've said on this sheet.
Are we all
Does
happy
that make
with
any
that?
sense?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, are there any there that would fail if they had their budgets reduced by a small amount, which is what would in effect happen if it came off all of 6 of them? Are there any that would completely fail?
Yeah, I think the difficulty that we have is because we're still working through the programme that was last agreed in 2019-20. By the time we get to the point of being able to deliver most of these projects, it's going to be well into 2023. And with cost increases that we've got at the moment, I think our worry is that we might not have sufficient funding to actually meet the local expectations. So
Yeah.
You know, I'm quite happy to look at reducing values, provided that there's an acceptance that the scope of the project might need to reduce. Well, will need to reduce as a consequence of that.
Yeah.
And at what point? At some point, if you do that to the nth degree, at some point, you're not achieving the objectives that you set out to in the first place. So it's just understanding where that tolerance is, I suppose.
Can I just remind us that the Peveril Road scheme was suggested would be spread over 3 years. So there is some saving there we haven't recognised yet.
And I think the Gwyder Street, we've budgeted there, I think, for 2 benches, which was the community request. But there again, if we weren't able to fund 2, maybe 1 would still be a worthwhile enhancement.
Something, yeah.
I think we can only make the recommendation.
So I think that those suggestions are all sound, aren't they? That we have these schemes, but we accept that they're all going to have some kind of reduced expenditure to take us within our budget, within our means. And Councillor Robertson's suggestions are marked there. And then, as you suggest, first of all, Petersfield, that there would only be 1 bench. And Peveril Road is also, I think, bordering on being a reserve item, isn't it? If that's the case, is that sufficient for you, John?
I think
Councillor Thornborough wanted
but
to
there are a
say,
few questions.
Chair, can I make a comment? Some of these, I think if there were reductions now, if these come forward in 2 or 3 years, it would be really good if they came back to the community, the councillors and the residents to explain what is available now the project comes forward, what's available within the funds, and talk to the community about donations for plants and volunteering, so that especially for the biodiversity ones, I think every project would be strengthened by becoming a community project. The residents will feel much more ownership and engaged with it, and I think that lead to greater success.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm saying is, I think a small reduction in each of the biodiversity projects, with the view of looking at how it can be expanded when it comes forward in 2 or 3 years, would be a really good way to deal with community biodiversity projects.
And the community engagement team I found very helpful, and I think that, and that doesn't require, that's a corporate thing, so it doesn't require a budget, so it does enable things to be done for a lot less money. So where have we reached? Have we given you enough, John, now to?
Hello?
Hello.
Councillor Moore's got a question.
Councillor Moore.
Sorry.
It's very similar to Katie's. I wonder if we could focus on the areas of most need, and also the parts of the project that can't be done by residents on their own. So things like the benches or building of any troughs or planters. Whereas for some of them, it's probably not where the 2,500 comes from, but things like the bug hotels and the bat boxes, you can make a bug hotel yourself. The things like the window boxes, people might be happy to provide their own. It's just that kind of managing the project and bringing people together and doing the stuff that people can't do without. I also wonder whether a bit more of allowing people to take on areas to plant themselves. Sorry, it's got something in my throat. I think that would be really popular, and would also be a way of encouraging people to increase biodiversity, look after their own communities, which people enjoy, but also would save money and leave more money for the things that residents can't do. Thanks.
It's not totally straightforward when you ask people to be volunteers. There's lots of, as the residents of Sedgwick found, they've gone through lots of hoops to be they have to get referees, etc., to do public volunteering. So it's more than just getting people together, and groups have got to be able to organise that. John, I think what you're asking us to do here is impossible. I think we've reached the point now, aren't we? Unless we actually pick over these and say we're going to knock this, and this off of each one. So what is the timescale for this? Is it that it goes back to the residents and we say there is not quite enough money, and you know, what would you like to be done instead of this? Or do we just make a recommendation that we like all of these, but we realise that we've overspent and we will await what the officers would suggest?
Or maybe what the executive councillor suggests.
Yeah.
When they consider it, because obviously they have been listening in.
Yeah.
And
you know, either that or we have to take a vote, basically, don't we? I mean, I think we've all.
I think it's a recommendation, it's not an approval. So
yeah, that's
I think
right.
What you've done is probably enough.
Okay, that's great. That's what I wanted to hear. All right. So, Councillor Smith, did you want to still speak?
Yeah, it was just a comment, and I'm aware we want to wind up, but it feels to me there's not, we're talking about balance between the different wards, and I just wanted to check that we really are happy with saying that the Peveril Road one could become a reserve, because to me there aren't that many schemes in Abbey.
No, you're right.
And that I feel quite concerning, particularly as, you know, Abbey is one of the wards in the city that's got very high needs. Whether we want to revisit that advice, that to me seems rather unfair on Abbey.
Yeah, so they have quite a high, Abbey has the community bench, and the Jack Warren Green is £3,000, so that's quite a high quota, and so they have two in the green things. They have £4,000 there, so they but I agree they've got less in the green and amber. Without actually doing all the sums closely, it's hard to say. Petersfield has a very small slot in the green, only 2,200, so it seems fair that it has more in the and Richard has actually taken quite a lot off the Petersfield ones as they stand. It seems fair that they have the green and amber ones as well, to my quick reckoning. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think we've already said as Abbey councillors that we'd be prepared to take quite a big reduction on the Peveril Green Amber, but we'd be really unhappy to see residents there ending up with nothing.
Fair enough, yeah.
It's so difficult to get buy-in to consultation in Abbey. We'd really not be very keen on knocking residents back completely.
I think then, if going back to Councillor Healy's suggestion that they all take a hit and we reduce them all by the same amount, I think, and then we can then include Peveril Road, can't we? And rather than it being a reserve.
Well, I'm afraid that doesn't work when you've got a thing like a bench seat, which is, you know, you can't take £600 off a bench. You don't have a bench at all.
No.
I think it would be possible to scale down some of the green ones, actually.
Yeah, they're the ones that can be reduced, aren't they? But but we have said that if they only had one bench instead of two benches, they would still be having something.
Yeah, no, I accept that. I was suggesting some of the green token aspects. So, for instance, the Jack Warren Green, knock it down to 500. That wouldn't be difficult because it's bits and pieces. There is a community bench, but there's also a lot of other bits and pieces as well.
Yeah,
and possibly one or two of the others in that top heading could be reduced a bit.
Yeah.
That would be my suggestion. We put through the Executive Council.
Yeah. Well, I think we have made our wishes clear now. I think we've done the best we possibly can on this, actually.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So I hope that's okay. And I'm sure that the Executive Council, if she wishes to discuss any more with me or with any of us, she will come back to us. Thank you. Right. I think.
Thank you, Chair.
If everybody's happy now, that was a great discussion. We don't have any open forum because we took that item earlier. So thank you to everyone for participating and for giving your time so generously. The next meeting has been moved and it will now be, it's scheduled for the 13th of March because there are clashes with various other things. I hope that's convenient for everybody, and that's a Monday. So just if you could pop that in your diary. So it will be Monday the 13th of March. Thank you all for coming, and could the producer now please terminate our live link? Thank you very much.